الآن يمكنكم المشاركة في مبادرة الأيام الرقمية تحت شعار انطلق بقوة مع جوجل، والتي يتناول فيها خبراء جوجل عناوين جديدة أسبوعيا مثل السحابيات، مهارات من جوجل، أندرويد، فلتر، ذكاء الآلة، فايربيس، ديزاين ثينكينج، مقسمة إلى دورات وورشات عمل يومية بالإضافة إلى مسابقات أسبوعية. شاهد الأيام الرقمية مباشرة على اليوتيوب وشارك رأيك وأسئلتك مع خبراء جوجل، واحصل على شهادة حضور في كل محاضرة تشترك فيها. هذا وأكثر من الأحد إلى الخميس ابتداء من الساعة 9 بتوقيت دبي عبر الرابط المبين youtube.com/gdgmena.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. أهلا بكم في حلقة أخرى من MENA Digital Days، أين سنتعلم بإذن الله الكثير من الأشياء، وصار لها الآن أكثر من عام أين تناولنا الكثير من سيشنز عن الكلاود، عن الماشين ليرنينج. معكم عليان عبدالنور GDG تيزيوزو. سأكون بإذن الله معكم اليوم للتحدث عن Function as a Service، وسنتعرف ما هو Serverless، وسنتعلم بإذن الله الكثير من الأشياء. سيشن سيكون بالإنجليزي، لكن سيكون هناك سيشنز أخرى بالعربي. إذا كانت لديكم أي أسئلة يمكنكم طرحها، وبإذن الله سنجيب عليها. يمكنكم طرح أي أسئلة بالعربي، بالفرنسي، بالإنجليزي. Hello everyone, Zulflawan, Aliane Abddenour with you, GDG Tiziuzu, and today we are going to talk about Google Cloud Functions, or what we call Function as a Service, where we are going to talk about serverless and the concepts about serverless and what is this architecture. I will be with you in 1 hour, where we are going to discover new stuff, a lot of stuff, and if you have any question, please don't hesitate. You can ask me, and then we will answer. So, I did sessions about compute engine, and we talked about what is an infrastructure as a service. Today we are going to talk about function as a service and why this is important, especially in the serverless, or what we call the Cloud 3.0. So we just go to Google Cloud Platform, to the GCP, and then to the serverless. As you can see, there are 3 products about serverless. Data, but for compute, we have 3 products. We have Cloud Run, Cloud Functions, and App Engine. App Engine is what Google proposed for the public when they started their cloud offering. So App Engine, it existed long ago, and there was App Engine, and then we have App Engine Flex, and now we have the Cloud Run. So the evolution, people can use Cloud Run or App Engine Flex. It depends on which platform we want to use that. So Cloud Function, this is something like simpler than Cloud Run. In the concept, we can say they are similar, but if we need something small, we can use Cloud Functions. Now, before we dive in the code, I want you to understand why do we need the serverless and why we talk about containers and all that stuff. So let me draw you something like we always do. So in the past, here I am, and we have what we call an app server like Apache, and then we have the database server. So we have requests, and then we have response. For example, I want to upload a picture, I want to see this video on YouTube. But the problem is that since everyone is trying to connect, there is many requests. And one single server cannot handle all that. So what we do, we bring a lot of servers, and those lot of servers what we do, we put what we call a load balancer. A load balancer. And we ask him, a load balancer has a single IP address. So when we get here, this load balancer sends the client or the requests to the server that is not busy, that is available. And the problem is that this solution costs a lot of money because we are buying physical servers. So what we did, let me delete this, and then let me draw something else. So we said, I'm here, we have a lot of servers, and then we have a load balancer, and then we have the database. So the load balancer do this, it splits the traffic, even if we have a lot of requests. So what we did, we changed those physical servers to virtual machines. So instead of having a single server, physical server, we replace it with a virtual machine, or we replace it with a container. Let's call it Docker. The good thing about this is that we don't need to invest a lot on physical machines. We buy 10 machines, for example, and in every machine, we use 2 virtual machines, for example. And then we will have 10 multiplied by 2, we will have 20 virtual machines that they will act like they were physical machine, because the user cannot see if it's a physical machine or a virtual machine. The user wants only to be served by his requests. So what happens is that the problem is that even if we use this, we cannot scale at a certain time. I will explain you the problem. So let's take, for example, this server and let's zoom in so we can understand what's going on. Let's have, for example, a Facebook. In Facebook, we first log in, and then I want, for example, to upload my picture. And then once I am in my interface, I hit the button upload. Once I upload, so I'm here, I log in, I upload the picture. Once I upload the picture, there is some stuff that happens for this picture. There is, for example, compression, and there is, for example, machine learning to detect, for example, if it is me, facial detection, or, for example, to convert it from PNG to JPEG. There is a lot of computation. The problem is that if I use this on a single code, those 3 steps don't consume the same resources. Why? Because login, for example, it will consume only a small CPU. The upload operation will consume, for example, this value of the CPU, but the compression, it will use, for example, the whole CPU. So what I do, instead of writing one single code, what I will do, one single code. This is called a monolithic. Monolithic. So the monolithic, we have a problem. People that will log in, imagine that I have the same server here. So if people try to log in, they will find the server busy. Why it is busy? Because it's busy trying to convert some images. So what I will do, I will split my application in 3 codes. The first code will only do login. The second code will only do upload. The third code will only do compression. And this way, that's what we call microservices. So in microservices, I give tasks for every service. It do only one task. The good thing about this is that once I affect the login task for one service, it will have its own resources. So even if it blocks, it will not block those 2. So I give other resources here, and I will give other resources here, and they will be independent. which means that even if I'm doing busy stuff here, I will not block people who will do login. And this is what we call the microservice architecture. So in microservice, those rows, we call them API. So we call some APIs between those services. And in those APIs for application programming interfaces, we exchange files. So those files, generally, they are JSON files. So I send a JSON here, and then I send a JSON here, I send a JSON here, a JSON here, and then in this JSON, I tell what's going on between this until I get my result. So in microservice architecture, we have our code that is split, and in every code, instead of using virtual machine, I don't use virtual machine. I use Docker, a container. So in microservice, let me delete this. What do I have? I have JSON, I have Docker, which is for container, and I have small services. And the way I use communication, I use HTTP, and there is something that is like HTTP, which we call REST. So every time you hear REST, this is something we say, for example, delete some resources, and the resources, we give it an URL. We will see that in a few minutes. So because we use this architecture scales well. Why? Because we provision as many Dockers as we need. So in this way, we have two ways to do it. Either we provision them by ourselves, we do everything by ourselves, or we do it in we tell our provider, do it by your own. So when the provider do it by their own way, we call it serverless. So the serverless, this is not, that doesn't mean that there is no server. There is always one server, a server. The difference in serverless, I don't manage the stuff. I tell my provider, for example, Google Cloud, I tell them, okay, do the stuff that makes me have all the requests, scale up, scale down, patch the operating system, do everything for me. What I can do myself is just program, I give you the code, and you do all the complex tasks. So the serverless, in a way, to make you understand better what is serverless, this is like a software as a service, for example, Google Docs, but the difference is that instead of using a software, we program. This is like a software as a service for programmers. Because when we go to Google Docs, you need to understand that Google provides a machine for us to work. Now, the problem is that with Google Docs, we don't need complex architecture. We don't need strong machines. But when we program, we are doing products. We do websites that scales up, scale down for millions of users. Here, we ask Google to provision as many resources as we need. And this is what we call serverless architecture. So imagine serverless, this is like a software as a service, but for programmers where we need a lot of resources. And here we are now with Google Functions. So since earlier I talked about this architecture where I draw small pieces of code. I draw 3 small pieces of code, login and upload. And let's call this do stuff. Those are just functions. So this function is function called login. We have another function that is called upload. We have another function that is called stuff. I let them communicate with each other using REST or using what we will see in a few minutes that we call RPC. So those are the ways. So I'm here. I don't see all the stuff that is working. For me, as long as it's working, that's fine. I don't care if it is monolithic or microservice, but as a programmer, I need to understand what is microservices. So to program those functions, there is this tool about function as a service. So it's easy. We just create a function and then we give it a name. I will create a function, then I will explain you what's going on deeper. So let's say my first function. And then I decide in which region I'm going to host it. So a region is a data server, but in a bigger scale. So in Google, there is the architecture of Google Cloud, if you don't know it. So we have the globe. We have, for example, Africa. We have Europe. Sorry for my drawing. We have North America, South America. We have Middle East and Asia. And we have Australia. So what happens? A region is something like this. It's a big place. And inside the region, we have what we call a zone. So this is a region, this is a zone. So a zone is, like we say in Arabic, we have الولاية, it's a region, and the zone, البلدية or المدينة. So let me come back here. We choose in which region. I always use US East 1. Why do I do this? To get the free tier. I will show you the free tier in a few minutes. And I always choose the US East because it's nearer from Africa than the center. So the East is just near to me. Now, the function as a service, how it works, it has two ways to trigger. So the function as a service, I said earlier, this is made to connect those codes. But we can use this, and we can use Cloud Engine, for example, App Engine Flex, or Cloud Run. But in Google Cloud Function, we use what we call a trigger. So what is the most important using function as a service is using it as a trigger. And there is two ways to trigger it. We will see that here. So we can use HTTP, which means that I just click, and then I have the old way of application. I click, I get a website. Or I will use a Cloud PubSub that we will see in another session. I will explain it, don't worry. And the cloud storage that we will see code in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So I will choose the HTTP. But before we go there, let me show you the ways Cloud Function works. So depending on your language, you will choose which way it will work. So we have the background triggers, and we will have what we call the cloud events. So the HTTP function, that's easy. We have an URL, we click on it, and we are done. And there is the trigger, or what we call the event-driven function. In event-driven function, we have two ways. We have background function and cloud event function. So if we program in Node.js, Python, Go, or Java, here we can use the background event-driven or background trigger, or if we use PHP, Ruby, and C#, here we will use cloud event. Now, what is cloud event? Cloud event, this is just this. In cloud event, this is like metadata. So we have two services, they need to communicate with each other in a standard way. So this first part, this is for the old HTTP. And this part this is what we call the cloud event. They are just K values, but they are standard. Why we need that? So we can have the multi-cloud. We host our application in Google Cloud. We want to talk to Amazon. We want to talk to Microsoft Azure. We want to talk our own cloud. That's fine. We can just use cloud events because they are standard. We just respect those two ways. Either we use a binary where everything is like in one level, or we use a structured where we host, we nest our value inside that block. Let's go back. And you can have the full specification in this GitHub. Later, we will share with you all the links. So everything is open source. You can have everything you want. So let me go back here. And okay, so the first way and the easiest way is to use the HTTP. So the HTTP, that means that every time I go to this website, it fires my function. So the event-driven, the event that makes me fire this function is when I get to this endpoint. Let's call the URL, let's call it endpoint right now. Does it require, does it require authentication or not? I don't want authentication, but be careful. When I show you this architecture, in reality, we don't use that. What we use, here is our 3 codes. We never let the user get directly to the function itself. What we do, we use what we call the API endpoint control. So one of the most known, that is of course a part of Google, it's called APG. So you can search for it, APG, A-P-G-E-E. This is the product that manages the API. Why do I need this? This is to control everyone, to control how much people can enter to this website, to make authentication, to make a lot of stuff. The tool or framework or whatever we can call it, that's called APG. And you can have, and as you can see, this is a leader in 2020. So if you know how to use APG, you can have a wonderful job. So let's go back to our functions. Here, I will make it simple. I don't need APG. I would just want to enter and see what's going on my function. I just save. So here is the website. Now I need to choose the runtime. What does it mean? The runtime is every time I run my function, how much resources I'm going to use. So for this, as you can see, this is run and this is time, but there is no information about CPU. So if we come to the docs, we can see now. So 128 megabyte of RAM that will use 200 megahertz of CPU. So if we have small functions, that will be enough. The more our function is complicated, the more we need a lot of RAM. And of course, cloud service is always in what we call pay as you go. So you need something small, we use smaller resources. We need something big, we use bigger resources. So let me come back here. Let's use the base because I don't need complicated. Now 60 seconds, that means that how much time, the maximum, can my function will be executed. Because function as a service, since it's serverless, the basic of serverless is that you don't pay if your application isn't working. That means that if you are idle, for example, you host a website and no one clicks on your website, you don't pay for that money. You pay $0 for that. You only pay when people comes and trigger your function. And this model is the base of serverless. You don't pay, for example, if I host it on Compute Engine, as long as I am using Cloud Engine, even if no one comes to my website, I'm paying for it. But for serverless, you don't pay until someone triggers your functions. So if I use 30 seconds, that means that the maximum that that this function can run is for 30 seconds. And 30 seconds, you need to understand this is a lot. Why? Because if we come to the documentation, you can see here that example, they used how much time? Generally, functions can execute in 300 milliseconds, which means that this is a small value because you need to optimize your function. Your function must not last too long, because if it lasts too long, better to go to Compute Engine. If you have small time, then go with function as a service. So if I come back here, I need, for example, 30 seconds at the maximum. And now, auto-scaling. Auto-scaling, you need to understand something, that the more you need requests, the more Google gives you those resources. But sometimes you are synchronized with some database that doesn't scale well. Here, you need to give it some maximum resource Dockers, or let's call it instances, that will fire for every function. Because we have, for example, 1 million clients, one function, one instance is never enough. So if we put empty, that means that as long as people come, as long as I serve them. That's why I need to limit my instances. Now I do next. And here is the part of programming. In the first time, I just choose how much RAM and CPU I need. Now, since I'm a programmer, Python programmer, I will just choose Python. For people using Node.js, you can use Node, you can use PHP. And as you saw earlier, every language, you are there. If you are a PHP developer, you are here, you are Node.js and so on. So every time, as you can see, my function is simple. It's really simple. There is no other function. There is only one function. And there is always two files, the minimum. There is the main and there is requirement. Requirement, this is for dependencies, Python dependencies, and this is the file that I'm going to execute. But I'm not going to execute the file. I'm going to execute the function. So let me delete this and write a function is simple. So div, so MENA digital day, and I need an argument which is called request, and return hello MENA digital day. That's easy. That's a function. And since the name of the function is MENA digital days, I bring it here. The entry point, that means that what do you want me? Which function do you want me to execute? And we just deploy. And that's it. We just created our function. So what happens now? There is stuff. So waiting this stuff to complete, I will explain you what's going on now. If you already saw my last session about Compute Engine and Cloud Build and so on, so what Google is doing now, I am here. I wrote a code in Cloud Function. And Cloud Function now, it will bring it will copy the code in Google Google storage. And the code, after it will be saved in Google storage, it will be uploaded to Cloud Build. In Cloud Build, it will generate a container that will be hosted on Google Container Registry. So in reality, my code is just here. So what happens? It will be saved on Google Cloud Storage, and it will upload it to Cloud Build. Once it will be in Cloud Build, there will be a container, a Docker, that will be hosted in GCR. So every time I want to execute it, it will directly come to GCR and execute it. So at the end, I'm writing function, but at the end, I'm executing Docker. So let me come here. Now my function is ready. Everything is working fine. Now what I will do, let me do this. So the trigger is what makes my function work. So if I click here, and here we are, I have a function that just ran. So what makes it run is by clicking on this URL. So what I just used right now, I just used what we call an RPC. So the RPC is that, so let me delete this. RPC is for remote procedure call. So what I did here, I didn't execute my code in my end. I send it somewhere, and this is Cloud function. So I send him some variables, and then I ask him to execute them. So I'm using some function, which is a procedure. Of course, there is a difference between a function and procedure, but let's say they are the same right now. So I'm executing them in a remote machine, and then I get a result. So Google has its own version of RPC, which is called gRPC, and the gRPC, they use what we call the Protobuf. You can use all those keywords to search them. To make it easy, here is an example about Protobuf. So if I do JSON to Protobuf, if you already know what is a JSON, the JSON is this. So let me zoom this. For example, I tell him the name, and I say MENA Digital Day. So as you can see, this is the JSON. This is what we used in the past using REST. But now with gRPC, this is what will be not sent. It will be compiled. It's a long process, but Google do that in their way. So if you are new to the internet or microservice, I advise you to start with JSON and REST. And once you are ready, you go to Protobuf and gRPC. But right now, just understand what is a JSON and what is REST. And by the way, there is a big difference between REST and RPC. The difference is this. So in REST, if I want to delete some resources, I send him what we call a verb. I tell him delete, and then I send him a new an endpoint. So I say, for example, API version 2, and then ID and 6. That means that I want to delete the product that has an ID equals 6. This is using REST. But in RPC, what I'm using, I say a function delete product, for example. I send it to this URL, and then I send ID equals 6. So that's it. So the difference between REST and RPC is that I'm sending the value inside the message, not directly in the endpoint. So let's go back to my function. So I just used the HTTP. Now, what if I use directly my own machine using gcloud? So to do this, let me just rewrite what I just used. So, sorry, to prove you what happened, I told you that the source code goes to Google storage. So if I refresh, as you can see, here is my source code. And once I upload it to Google Cloud Storage, I go to container registry and I create a container. So every time I'm executing this function, in reality, I'm executing this container. As you can see, hello version 1, because every time, not this one, every time I execute a function, there is an update. So ist one, my first function, as you can see, it has version 1. So I delete everything and I show you how am I going. So I delete function and I show you how I am going to execute this in my machine. For this, I just need the command gcloud and then I give it the argument. So let me work directly on my file. So I have a function. So let me say def hello1. And if you want to understand what is a request here, you just come here and type Flask request context. And you will have more information in depth, because in reality, Google function, when it comes to Python, they are just using Flask. For people coming from Python, they know what is Flask. This is like Django, but in an easier way. So let me come back here. So request and return hi there. And I write a second function, def hello2 request. And then I tell him return hi MENA did. Oh, okay, right. So as you can see, I just need two files, main and requirement. Requirement to put the dependencies. Now I get inside the folder where I just write my function. Now what I do gcloud and then functions. So as you can see, last time we used gcloud and then compute. So it's by group. So let me come here. Let me zoom again. So if I do gcloud functions, and then I say deploy, it says, what do you need when you want to deploy? Here is our argument. So because it's not clear here, let me zoom here. So gcloud functions deploy. And it says, what do you want to do with deploy? And by the way, if you don't know how to use gcloud, you just do something like this. gcloud help -- and then you write your keywords, for example, functions, and then it will gives you an array that shows what do you need. As you can see, I just write gcloud functions manage Google Cloud Functions, call, delete, deploy, create, and update Google Cloud Functions. So I need to do gcloud deploy, gcloud functions deploy. Then here we are. I need allow authentication gated, like what I did. Entry point is, because if we come here, what I needed which trigger. Once I save it, I choose how much memory I need. Once I finish, I choose the runtime, and once I finish the runtime, I choose which entry. That's why I come here and I copy this. So gcloud functions entry point, what is, for example, hello, and then I come back here, and then let's have the trigger. So since we need an HTTP trigger, we need this. So gcloud, and we passed this, and entry point equal hello, for example. I know it will not work, but I will just copy it and paste it to my project. And then I need the runtime. So what is the runtime? Triggers resource, trigger, and set environment, runtime. Runtime equals Python 33 and 7. And now I will have an error because I don't have entry point. So let me paste, come here. That's this. So the entry point is hello 1. Or let me hello A and hello B. So hello A, and gcloud deploy trigger HTTP, and runs trigger HTTP, which deploy entry point on time. It must be here. Okay. I did. I need the region. So let me show you something. When we talked about regions and zones, you need to understand something. So if I do gcloud compute engine, remember, and then if I do regions list in compute engine, since I'm using something deeper, so I can use regions or I can use zones. So if I type those two commands, they will work. But if I use functions, and then I ask him to give me zones, it will not work. Why it will not work? Because it's a serverless. They need to scale. So I'm hosting my application in region, not in zone. So if I do regions, it will give me all the region. So I come here and US East 1. I copy it, and then I say gcloud functions, and gcloud config set. I want to set functions region, because in the last session we replaced functions by compute, and then US East. Now I just configured my region. Now if I deploy my function, it should run, because what I did, I just gave it the region. Why does it need it again? Anyway, region, so let's choose US East 1. I must make some mistake. gcloud functions, deploy region, trigger HTTP. Anyway, I will come back later. So because we don't have time, I don't have time to lose on commands. Let me show you something. I tried to deploy this function in the cloud, but it didn't work for me. You suppose that I forgot gcloud. What I will do, I will try to deploy it in my machine right now. So what I did, Google in reality gave us this for open source. So if we go to GitHub, of course, the link I will share with you later, this is it. Function framework Python. And this is exactly what's going on right now. So this is a Python package or Node.js package. It's up to you to choose. So I will close Node.js since I'm using Python. And then what you just need to do is package install, and then you do install, and then functions framework. And then what happens, since I already installed it, that will work. So I say functions framework once it's installed, and then I do, if I run it just directly, it will ask me, I need a target. So I add target, which is hello A. This is the entry point. Now it runs a server. I go to the server and I get the same thing. I just run Cloud Function in my machine. Now, if I want to run the second function, I say hello B. So if I come back to the same link, you see every function, you must run it with one URL. That's why you need to decouple your application in functions. Every function has its own URL. So what is this framework? Let me explain you something deeper. So the Docker that runs when we execute our functions, there is an Ubuntu, and then there is a second layer, which is the runtime that we choose it, Python or Node.js. And then there is the function framework. And then there is our code. So what we manage, we only manage this code, and Google manages this. And what I did now, I installed it on my machine. This is not something complicated, but Google, they use an infrastructure, or if you want to scale it on your own machine, you install Kubernetes. And on top of Kubernetes, you have two choices. You either install Knative or kubeless. So what is Knative and what is kubeless? So Knative, this is what makes Cloud Run. So if you want to see Cloud Run, there is a sessions in MENA Digital Days. So the Knative, this is to make you run and deploy and scale application on Kubernetes, because Kubernetes is a toolbox. So you install Knative to make it more easier. And then you have the kubeless. The difference is that with Knative, you run complicated functions. But if you want just simple functions like we did, you can install kubeless. So kubeless or Kubernetes. So here we have Kubernetes, let's say that, and then we have another layer, which is Knative. And then Knative manages us those Dockers. And it seems that Google don't use Kubernetes. They use something that is called Borg. And I bring you a link that will be shared. Can you please share the links? So the Borg, you can have this wonderful podcast that we will you will understand what's the difference between Borg and Kubernetes, because Google used Borg, and then they created Kubernetes and they gave it to the Cloud Foundation. But it seems that inside Google they still use Borg. So Borg, this is not on commodity servers. They are on a special technology, but if you have a commodity server, simple computers, you can use Kubernetes. So this is the architecture. So we run an Ubuntu and then a runtime and then function. So if you want to only manage the code, you write this code and then Google scales what's Google manages the Docker and so on. And then if you need to do all the stuff, you can host this function framework on, for example, Cloud Run or on Google Compute Engine or on GKE, and then it will be fully controlled by you. So let's go back here. So I show you a simple function using an HTTP. Now let me show you a function using a trigger. That means that I don't need to click on the URL. I need a trigger. To do this, let me come back to functions. And then let me recreate a new function I deleted earlier. And then I ask him this time, resize, let's call it resizer. And then the trigger this time, I want cloud storage. In cloud storage, what is cloud storage? You need to understand how there is a difference between a hard disk as a hardware and or SSD as a hardware and how the operating system sees. So the hard disk is just 1 and 0 and 1 and 0. The operating system needs to split in a way to understand those 1 and 0s. And this is what we do when we format our disk. So for example, NTFS and FAT32 or ext4, ZFS, XFS, and so on. So the problem is that with big data, because when we talk about Google, we don't talk about terabytes, we talk about exabytes and petabytes and so on. We need to group a lot of disks to make the user think that this is just a simple disk. That's why there are a new way, which is the bucket storage. The bucket storage, this is different from what we use in daily life. The bucket storage is that we write and we avoid to delete. And in the bucket, there is no concept of folders and files. There are only files. Even if we want to organize in folder, they are just for organization, not how the operating system will see it. So if you want something open source, you can search for those products. You have Ceph. If you want to own your own or search advanced stuff, and you have Gluster. So Gluster and Ceph are what you can install in your own premise, in your own cloud, or you can search for Google Cloud Storage, which we abbreviate GCS. So GCS, this is the equivalent of Amazon S3, which is the product that Google uses. So the concept of GCS, here is it. Can you please add me 15 minutes? I need 15 minutes so I can finish this. So to get this, we just go to cloud storage here. And here is the picture that we will have. And in, yeah, thank you. Can you please add 20 minutes? So earlier, we always use gcloud. Now we don't use gcloud. We use the command that is called gsutil. Gsutil, this is the command that makes us deal with Google Storage. So let me come back to, yeah, here. So I don't need those functions anymore, because I deleted the function. And you need to understand one thing. Once you delete, you cannot make them back. So be careful. Don't just delete like that. That's why I will show you something. So when we create a bucket, we choose a global name. That means that why we choose a global name, because, let me end this, zoom, because our link, for example, Google is like this, google.com, which is unique. That's why in cloud storage, we need special protocol, let's see, that is called GS and my bucket. So if I use this, you see that my bucket, there is someone who already named my bucket, and they will say it's already taken. That's why we need to choose a unique name. So let's say, for example, MENA PD. I guess no one already used that. Continue. And the bucket, either multi-region, dual region, or region. Let me choose region because I want to make something simple, because I want to communicate with my function. I don't want it to get accessible elsewhere. And South Carolina, continue. And here I explained to not delete your files. The standard is like Google Drive. You upload, you use it. And then you have the nearline, the code line, and the archive. The nearline, this is when you are in enterprise and you have some files that are not accessible every time. So better to use nearline or code line. That will cost less. And this is kind of archive. You are archiving your file. So instead of paying for them because they are hosted somewhere in Google Cloud, you just convert them. And then you can even choose after a certain time, you convert the standard to a nearline. For example, after 30 days or 90 days, it becomes nearlines. So it will be automatically archived and you don't have to pay a lot of money for them. So continue. And I want to be accessible by public. And then I choose fine grained. Why fine grained? This is the old way, so I can configure the ACL. Who can access to this file? So I continue. Encryption, of course, because it is storage, you either choose to encrypt by a key provided by Google, or you encrypt it using by your own. And I create. Now I just created a bucket, and inside this bucket, I'm going to upload files. I will not upload yet. I will go to Cloud Function. I create a new function, and here I say resizer. Function is in East1 to make it easier. Now here I want to fire it every time someone create a new file. So every time I upload something here, I want it to fire the event. Which bucket? I do browse, and then I just created my new bucket. Select. Now, if I save, the runtime, of course, I leave it by default. 60 seconds is too much, 30 seconds. And then next. Now I need Python code. So if I come to Python, I bring you a new code. So I will share it with you. So if I come here, resizer, and sorry, I zoom it so you can see. Now, if I come here, I passed. I will explain the code, don't worry. And then I come to the name of the function. I come here. And of course, as you can see, I'm using third-party libraries. I'm using the wand. The wand is the Python binding of ImageMagick. ImageMagick, this is a library that makes you zoom, that makes you convert, and all that stuff programmatically. If you want to use Google, you use Cloud Vision. So Cloud Vision, you need to use this with Cloud Vision to work, for example, on picture of people that you need to resize, that you need to tag, and so on. So this is a perfect combination. So wand, I want wand as a dependency, and there is the Google Cloud. So Google Cloud, and here we are. So if I do deploy, and I will explain you the code. So the code, I'm waiting. The code, it's easy. So what I do, I just import a picture, and then I will resize it to 100 and 100. Once I resized it, I will upload it with a content type image JPEG. The code, it's from Stack Overflow. It's a guy that shared, he converted, I think, a Node.js code to a Python code. I bring it to you. So it's free because the guy uploaded it for free. So it's for free for everyone. So I'm waiting for this. So let me come here and see what's going on. And then there is an error. So if I come to the details, there is cannot import storage from Google Cloud. Why? So if I come here, so I made a mistake on dependencies. That's fine. So launch Google Cloud. So and our location. Let me edit the source code and go to the dependencies. Yes, next. And then as you can see, here is the source code. So you can, sorry, and direct. So which dependencies he used? So he used Google Cloud Storage. Yeah, sorry. So this is the library because I made a mistake on which name. Yeah. So this is the name of the package. So if I redeploy, there will be version 2. As you saw earlier in Google Cloud registry, there is version 1. Now it will re-upload a version 2 because they are versions. So keep going, keep going, keep going. I hope now it will work. So you can see at the end. And of course, there is a complicated project here. So this one, of course, the links are shared. So in this one, there is a function that makes you, sorry, not this one. This one I close it. Yeah, this one, it will make your picture, if there is brutality, if there is something bad in the picture, it will blur it. They use Cloud Vision. It will be a good exercise for you. I cannot use that online because they use, maybe some people will not like those pictures, so you can use them by your own. So this is good, for example, if you want to make a website for kids. So if a kid comes there, he will not see violent pictures. So if I come here, let me see the details. Those errors are the old ones, hopefully. And now, please work. It should work because now it's uploading. And by the way, for Python, it depends on which Python you are using. So with the dependencies, if you have a Python 3.7, all this is installed by you. If you have 3.8, you just check about the docs. So if I come back to function, it works. Perfect. Now, let me go to storage, upload a file. I want to upload this weird cat. So this is like the size. This is its metadata. This is 500 by 500. That's fine. Let me upload it. And as soon as it detects that there is something that I just uploaded, if I come to the logs, you will see that it fired the function. And the function, what it does, it just executes some code. Now, the details of the code, it's up to you to write your own code. But the most important for me is what happens in the function as a service. As you can see, it fired the function. So if I come back here and I refresh, I will see the picture, which is a smaller version of the picture I just used. So this is a thumbnail. Now imagine I want to share the thumbnail. What I do, I come to those 3 points and then I do edit permission because I choose to do ACL. And then here I add an entry and then I do public. As you can see, when you choose the public, there is 2 ways. All authenticated users or all users. All users for everybody, but all authenticated users, this is for people that have already authenticated to Gmail, for example. So I will use all users. And then if you see now, and if I click on it, as you can see, the link of the picture in reality, this is it, GS, using the Google Storage Protocol. But now, because I shared it with people, it must use the HTTPS. So if I click on it, and that's it. I just converted for free a picture. You can have your own solution. That's why we say Google function, this is a glue. A glue, that means that it connects a lot of service on Google Cloud. So for example, pops up, it will listen for something and then fires an event, or for example, with AI, where you can use Cloud Vision, you can have a lot of solution. So before we end, I promised you last session to see, or before, let's check for questions. Is there some questions? I still have 10 minutes. Let me check. Please, if you have questions, just ask. Do you have some questions? You need to understand something. The question is, the physical one, it will be secure than the virtual one. When we talk about physical and virtual, we talk about hardware. But when we talk about what we can use, we talk about the operating system. That means that when we run, for example, on VMware, or VirtualBox, or on Google Compute Engine, Ubuntu itself, he considers it as it is in a machine. Of course, he will detect that if it's virtual or physical, but if someone wants to break in your system, he will check for firewall, for example. That means that there is no difference between physical and virtual. An operating system, when it's virtual or physical, you configure it in the same way. That's what we call hardening the OS. So when you want to harden your OS, physical or logical for virtual, that's the same thing. Maybe you mean that if I get to some machine, I can get to the other machine because they share some stuff. No, you need to understand that there is an isolation. There is a perfect isolation when it comes to virtual machine, unless you enable some shared folders. There are other best practices about hosting on virtual. Of course, you have some shared resources. But when you have your own on-premise, you need to harden your OS and consider it like it was physical. Once you do that, then you can check about what happens if they share the same CPU. And I don't think they will share it because there is a strict isolation. Any other questions? And let me show you last thing. So let me do this. I uploaded with you this code GCE updater because what happened in last session is that when I get to my website, I made a mistake, and this mistake, here is it. So my mistake was that if I do ls-l, the one that was responsible on copying my code, it was read and it was not execute. So if I come to this, I don't need it, I don't need it. So yeah, the trigger in last session, when I came to inline, if you remember, I put something like that. So I come here and then I put something like that. So I got the permission execution because this file was not executable. Because I told you before the session, I reset all the project and I remade the project from scratch. So now if I do sh copier, it doesn't need permission. It doesn't need the execute permission. So once I get this, as you can see, if I refresh now I will do a last thing is that if I do nano handlers and then I come here and I write finally it worked, and then I save it, git add everything, git commit message finally, and make it done, and then git push. So now if we wait a little bit, now it will fire because it's an event-driven solution. So now when my source code goes to cloud source, it will go to cloud build. Cloud build will fire this this command sh copier.sh. What is copier.sh? This is it, copier.sh. So it goes to my service account. It will connect to this machine. Once it connects, it will copy those files. Once it copy, it will run this script. This script refresh sh. I will show you just a few minutes. Now if I come here, I didn't touch the server. As you can see, I touched my code locally. I uploaded it with Git. Finally, it worked. So what happens? How you are going to use it? I added the, where is it? I added the description here. What you can do, you enter to your machine. So if I do SSH using the service account, and then once you are there, you need to do that the first time. You need to do that. Once you are in the machine using your service account, that you created, you just need to install this tool, enter. So enter, if I come here, this is in Linux, enter Linux. This is a tool that watches the change of your file. So every time there is something change, it will execute something. What I did, I told him every time you see something change with ls, I want you to execute the script in a background. So if you enter the first time, you run this, you will get some error. Ignore it because there is no prior Python. So if I do nano refresh, so if you come here, there are just two commands. The first one, it kills the Python that is recently working, and then it launches again another Python using the user, which is www, which is the nginx, and then it runs it in a background. So you just do that, and then you don't need to SSH to your machine. You need to do that the first time, and then you will never, ever SSH to your machine. And last information, I always use the free tier. I'm someone that tries always to use the best for free. So you need to know that Google now, the free tier, this is not the F1 micro, which is 500 megabytes. This is now the E2, which is 1 giga for free. So this is this started on August 1st. So in case you have already a machine that is running, the way that you want to convert it, it's easy. You just, because what happens, you are just asking to Google to give you more resources, which means that you don't need to delete and do stuff. So you just come here, you stop your machine. Once you stop it, Google will release the resources. So what we do, I will do that in 2 minutes, and then we will end. So let me check about the questions. شكرا عمر إبراهيم. جزاك الله خيرا. So waiting for this to, you have those notifications here. So I'm waiting to end. Okay, just because there are many people, you know that even big enterprises, they are hosting their solution on Google Cloud. So of course, to release some resources, it will take a small time. So now, come on, release it. So it's waiting. And let me enter. So normally, because I cannot change the type of the machine and the machine is running, I need to stop it. This is exactly what we do in VirtualBox. You cannot change resources while the machine is running. You need to shut it down, and once you shut it down, you will do what you want. So, come on. So, don't forget to migrate to E2 Micro. This is for free. This is 1 giga for free, the free tier. And this one, I don't need it. I don't need it. So, okay, it finished. Okay, now it's stopped. So what we need, we just go to our virtual machine once it's stopped, and then we change what we want. We want to make it stronger, we pay for it, or we can make it for free. So sorry for the connection. It should work now. So waiting for this, as you can see, if I come to the history of cloud build, you can see all the builds, they happen now. So if I come here, oh, come on. But it's only now that it stopped. Any question, please? I don't know why it takes so much time using this connection. So anyway, when it's, let me open this in new tab. Maybe it's because of this. So to put it together, Cloud Function is something you need when you split your code and make triggers. So now it works. Now I go to edit. Once I go to edit, now I choose here my machine. So you choose E2 because it was N1, E2, and then here you choose this one. And then you save. And that's it. You just upgraded your machine for free. It seems that it was long ago that Google was using the 0.5 gigabyte, but now you can use 1 gigabyte. So it's time to upgrade for free. Thank you very much. شكرا جزيلا لكم. Sorry if I make some mistakes because that's direct, that's the life. Thank you very much. Please be safe. See you in better days, inshallah.